Alright, recording has started. So right off the bat, I'm noticing we were starting off pretty far away there. And we might talk about distances and where McCree likes to play after this game is done. We'll just demonstrate that in the practice range. Very nice shot. Keep in mind, Flashbang is a pretty close range ability, and you're not going to hit it from there. Okay, when you're low, make sure you're staying in line of sight of your team. So, for example, the Ana, right, where she was on point. Yeah, we were kind of running into a small little corridor where we were away from her, right? So, when we need healing and we're low, make sure we're running over to where supports can heal us. On top of that, press I need healing. That way they know that you need healing and they are able to find you a lot easier.
Yeah, okay. My bad.
No, you're good, man. That's what I'm here for. Nice shot.
Oh, I didn't. Okay, I'm going back.
Yep, so then in that instance, you probably shouldn't have been forwards in the first place, right? So just make sure you're looking through walls and seeing, like, how many teammates do I have left
Oh my
alive.
god. Jesus. Okay.
Yep, that way you don't push forwards when you see that you're down a bunch of people. Alright, we'll talk about positioning after this game is done, but for now, just keep in mind, try not to be out in the open, right? But we'll
Okay.
talk about that more in depth afterwards.
How many plays? No, Zarya.
There, make sure you're just using your roll to get back to spawn faster, right? So far, just a lot of mistakes being made. It's not necessarily just, you know, the lack of us shooting at stuff, but we're dying because we're out in the open, or our a lack of positioning, and then in the last fight, we just didn't use abilities when we had it.
You know, that was a bad idea. Why did I come here?
Assemble at this location.
Okay, you probably want to go be taking the high ground right now. High ground's probably where you want to be. Again, that'll be something I can explain after we get into this next game here. Or after this game's done.
You know what? Leave me alone.
Very nice. Pay attention to his health bar though, right? That we probably didn't need to drop if we saw that he was that low, right? Because then we could have just killed him and stayed up there on the high ground.
Yeah, I got scared. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Come here. What are them? 1 second.
Okay, very nice.
No, that was a bad idea.
Okay, make sure you're watching your health bar and you're requesting healing when you don't have it, right? So it gives your supports an in-game audio cue, right? That way they can hear where the heck you're at, right? And that gets you healing faster and easier. Alright, so before we were saying that you could probably stay on the high ground because there's just one monkey who's low, but you know that's not the case when you have 3 people pushing you and it's a nano Zarya who's full HP, right? So in that case we dropped way too late. So far it's just a lot of I'd probably say one of the bigger ones we're working with is awareness of understanding what is happening around us. And when we understand what's happening around us, we're therefore easier able to make better decisions, right? You can't make good decisions when you don't know what's happening. On the other hand, you can make good decisions when you understand what's happening. So just want to focus on our awareness. Now, real quick, while you're in, are you able to swap over to Discord real quick while you're in the spawn here?
Oh, the cheese alone.
Yes.
Yeah, so just like real quick, we'll just go over something in training range or practice range, or you just take 30 seconds. All right, so good positioning, right? Actually, let's just go over range since it'll be the shortest, right? You don't do a whole lot of damage from back here. From back here, we do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? 6
second,
shots to
Adam.
kill, right?
Oh my god.
Up here it takes us 1, 2, 3 shots, right? So we do a whole lot more damage closer up. So we want to stay within a medium distance, so kind of like here to there, something like that. We want to stay within this range, not going too far, also not going too close, because the closer we are, the more people can kill us. There's a whole bunch of other people who are better at close range, and then we don't really do a whole lot of damage from max range. And on top of that, from back here, targets are also smaller and harder to hit, and we don't have any scope or sensitivity. All right, you can hop back in your game here.
Okay.
So just keep in mind your ranges and make sure we're playing at a medium range from people, not too far away, not too close.
Okay, thank you for the insight.
All right. You seem to be crouch spamming very, very fast. I just recommend just doing it a little bit less frequent than that, as it's going to allow you to be a little bit more consistent with your shots. And then on top of that, you're not going to get as much of a benefit if you're just spamming it that fast, because really what that means is that you're not really moving at all on their screens. You're just going to be at head level most of the time. If you do it a little bit more infrequently, then it mixes it up a little bit more.
Nice. Nice. Nice, Adam.
Make sure you're reloading every time you get the chance. So like pretty much any time you're not actively shooting at things, you're reloading, right?
You're talking shit.
So anytime you have a lull in time where you can do that. Yeah, we probably get aggressive on these guys because they're a little bit far forwards, right? We're playing a little bit passive there when they're really, really far forwards. Also, we could flash Lucio, right? Just make sure you're using your abilities and people are within range of it. There, you can probably break that wall if you shoot at it, right? That way you can just get through faster.
No, no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. No, I'm dead.
Alright, I think we're going to talk about how to know whether or not you won or lost a fight after this game, we're done here. Yeah, so just as a forewarning, after we're done here, you might need to tell your friend that you're going to be a couple minutes while we talk through some stuff.
Okay. Listen, I am sorry. I am sorry.
Alright, so there, just gotta be aware of our surroundings so that we're not getting caught off guard from the Ana walking right up next to us. And then we also ran quite a bit ahead of our team, so we just want to make sure that we're not going too far ahead of them. For the most part, we probably want to be behind most of our teammates. Okay. Another thing to keep in mind is that we have not yet used an ultimate, and ultimates are very powerful abilities. When it comes to using our ults, pretty much you want to be using them as soon as you get them. So anytime a fight has not been won or lost, and you have your ult, you should be using it, right? So far we had an ult last round, we had an ult this round, and we didn't use either of them. So we just want to make sure we're using them much more often because they're very, very powerful abilities. And when they're not used, they don't get any value at all, right? You haven't gotten a single value out of any ults so far, right? Just because we haven't used the abilities. Now, in terms of how we can talk about how you can look to use your ultimates if you're struggling with that after this is done as well. But for now, we just want to make sure we're using it. So make sure you're paying attention to the fact that we have our ult, right? That's another awareness thing, is make sure on your HUD you're glancing at your health, you're glancing at your ult charge, right? That way we know where the heck we're at, right? When we're at like 80, 90, 100 to our ult, we're thinking about how we're using our ult, right? That way we can get it off and use it effectively, whereas so far we have not used it once, right?
Well, that's because I've been trying to optimize using my ult like to the like fullest potential. That's why
Most
I've
of the
been
time,
trying.
yeah, most of the time you're not going to want to do that. Like if you're trying to go for like 6-man kills or something like that, that's a pretty ineffective way to go about ulting, as you can win fights by killing 2 or 3 people, right? And so even now you don't want to go for one person most of the time, but even just going for 2 people could be a very, very massive advantage for your team, right? And 6-man ults are going to come by around very, very rarely, and that means that you're not going to be using it very often. So you're going to get more value out of using it more often and getting a couple kills.
Listen, Lucio, we can talk about this.
Okay, so there that's positioning stuff again. We'll talk about that, but just make sure you're with your team. You're not out in the open on your own. And then yeah, just in general, getting like a 6-man ult is like a 1 in 50 games type of thing, or like something like I don't even know what number to put on that, but it's a very rare thing to happen. So it's not something we should be actively seeking out. Here, take a look. Is there anybody on point?
No.
Right, so we back up and we just take high ground, right? That way we're already on the really good positioning. We always want to rotate to the best positioning in between fights, and we'll talk about why high ground's so fantastic after this game's done, right? But just for now, know that pay attention to whether or not you're winning or losing. When you see that you have 0 people on point, back off and take the high ground.
No, no.
Alright, so awareness, make sure that, so every time you die, deaths are very massive. How many deaths do you have right now, just to emphasize my point here? You have 8 deaths, right? Deaths are a
Yes.
very massive thing to look to improve on, right? Every time you die, it's 10 seconds of time where you're respawning, 10 seconds of walking back, right? So deaths take out 20 seconds each, right? Very massive thing, and we want to look at our deaths and think, how could we have improved? How could we have done better on that? How could we have stopped that death from happening? Sorry, I keep talking afterwards.
Oh my god!
Very nice.
Oh my god, that was so. I need to clip that.
Alright,
I need to clip
very
that.
nice. So yeah, deaths, right? If we just took out a calculator real quick, 20 seconds times 8 means that we have
1 minute and
not
60 seconds.
what?
I think. I think that's 2 minutes.
Yep, 2 minutes exactly. 2 minutes and roughly 2 minutes point 6. So that'd be like basically 2 minutes and 40 seconds, right? So we just want to make sure that we're not dying, right? Because when we're dying, that's taking out an entire, like so far, that's been an entire 2 minutes and 40 seconds, right? Where it's not just us not participating, it's us not participating in fights, which puts our team at a disadvantage and means that our team's losing for those fights. So we are having a negative impact when we're dying, so therefore we want to look to cut out our deaths. So there's a bunch of different ways that you can die, right? You could be in bad positioning, you could have bad awareness of your environment. So for example, that last death that we had, right, on the high ground, we didn't notice the McCree was there, right? So that comes in at two different things. Making sure that you're looking around you, and make sure that you're using your ears and you're listening, right? If we're paying attention to footsteps and audio cues, then that means that we hear McCree walking up and we can react accordingly. We can turn around and kill him, right? So we want to make sure we're listening and using our ears. We can turn up our volume if we need to, but it's also just making sure we're really, really paying attention to our audio so that we're not getting caught off guard like that and dying, right? You can also misuse your abilities to die. You can also be too aggressive or too passive, right? There's a bunch of different ways to
Yeah.
die, and we just want to think about how
Oh my
and why
god,
do we die.
Sarah.
Okay, we could peek back in the spawn to get that health, or we could just get healing by our team. Right.
I have a question. Do I keep shooting or no?
Do you keep shooting or what?
That breaking shields.
Yeah, break. You can just break shields whenever it's an option. But what we can talk about some ways that you can look to get around the shield. So I haven't seen too much of a problem with it.
Nice headshot. I'm supposed to kill her. My bad.
Yep. So just make sure we're paying attention to it, right? If we'd like take a look at our team comp, right, real quick, we really don't have anything that can kill her very easily besides us, right? We have a bunch of, okay, now we have an Astra. We have a bunch of people who can help chip away at her, but we really just want to make sure that we're really keeping tabs on her and keeping an eye on her, because it's kind of our job to take care of her. And make sure we're reloading anytime there's a lull where we can't see anything, right? That way we have all our ammo for when we can. Okay, make sure you're using your Flashbang, right? We're using that thing very, very infrequently, and it's a very important ability. So we can look to flash the Zarya when she got really close to you like that. You can also flash above the Reinhardt's shield, and that can present an opening to kill the Rein.
Oh my god. Oh my god. Adam, don't go in. Adam, don't go in.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, so keep in mind, like, Flashbang as well as our ultimate, right? We just haven't been using our Flashbang very often, right? And sometimes we're using it too far away, but then sometimes there's people right next to us and we just don't use it, right? So make sure when somebody's right next to us that we're using our Flashbang, which opens up the ability to kill them very easily. On top of that, keep in mind, you can also flash above a Reinhardt shield to open up for a kill on him, right? That's something you can do to make it just easy to finish him off.
Oh my god, this Sarah's annoying. Adam, why do you keep changing your
I don't know, man. Just panicking. I'm very wrong mistake.
Good.
Alright, so why don't you tell your friend they might be a bit, and then also, wait, so we have 23 minutes, and then I usually take the last 10 minutes to go over what we're, like, all the main points and stuff that we talked about. So that means that we really only, or we're gonna have like 13 minutes left here, so we might want to just go over like a replay or a quick play game rather than going back into comp, because we're not gonna have time to finish that. So you can, just let them know whatever you want to let them know, but you might not be able to play with them in comp again for the rest of the session here. All right, so I'm going to be streaming if you want to take a look at my screen. All right,
Okay.
we're gonna go over quite a bit of stuff here. So first off, I think we're gonna go over your movement, as our movement is slightly wacky. So first off, strafing, right? So strafing is just going left, right, and what this does for you is this means that you are going to make it more difficult for them to hit you, because a standing still target is much harder to kill than a moving target, right? Or sorry, much easier to kill than a moving target, right? A moving target is much harder to kill, right? But there's a poor way to use your movement, right? And so far, what it's looked like with our strafing is that we're kind of doing this. Now, when you do this and you're doing it too fast, you're going to notice that we don't really even move on the screen of the enemy player. From their perspective, we're not really going anywhere. We're pretty much standing in the exact same places we were before, right? Now, if we go too slow, now we're going to be predictable because we're basically walking in a straight line. So what you want to be doing is you want to kind of find a nice rhythm where you're kind of going from one side of their head to another, where it's kind of in the medium here, right? It's not too fast, it's not too slow, it's kind of medium, and you don't necessarily need to do just AD constantly. You can mix it up a little bit, be randomized, but you don't want to be going too much in one direction or the other. But the problem is, most of the time here, we're just pressing the buttons too fast, and this is also going to be pretty jarring, and it's going to make shooting much more difficult when you're moving around like this, because you'll notice that when you are moving, your movement affects your aim, right? And I'd probably say this is a pretty big one for you, as I think it's been messing up you a little bit. Is when if we're, for example, here, like when we move right, that puts our crosshair off of their screen, right? When you move, it affects your aim, right? Now, if we're trying to, for example, hit this person and we aim to the right and we move to the right at the same time, now we're going to be over here, right? Because we aimed to the right and we moved at the same time, which adjusted us twice as fast over in the right direction, right? Now, if what we need to do, therefore, is adjust for our movement. So if we're moving to the right, we're aiming to the left, right? That way we can stay consistently on top of them, right? Stay consistently on top of them. But if we're doing this too fast, this can become difficult because we can't really predict our movement too well and it becomes very shaky, right? So we just want to be careful that we're not doing that. We're doing the exact same thing with our spam crouching. You'll notice that when we spam crouch, essentially on their screen, it's going to be doing the same thing. Is that like you can see this in comparison because you basically our crosshair is going to be their crosshair if we're standing just across from them here. So just pretend the bot is you, right, on the other side. On their screen, essentially, you're just standing still the entire time, right? You're not even really moving very much for them, right? You're maybe we're hitting an extra body shot in there, but for the most part, we're just hitting headshots pretty much the same just because we're spamming it. But if we instead kind of move around and add it in once in a while, right? Now this becomes a lot less it becomes a lot less easily hittable, right? And it is also going to, like, this is kind of like jarring again, where like if what you're doing is like you're doing this, where like you're doing this like very very fast, and it's just making your entire screen very shaky and therefore very difficult to hit shots, right? So instead, slow it down a little bit, not too slow, definitely don't go too slow, but you want to mix it up to where you're going like this, right? And you're just kind of pressing some random buttons, adding in a crouch once in a while, and that's going to make your movement a little bit easier to control, a little easier for you to be able to predict and then kind of go in the opposite direction accordingly. So kind of adjust accordingly with how you're aiming, and it's also not gonna make your screen as jarring. Does that all make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. All right. So moving on here. So in terms of flashbang, just keep in mind the range of it, as sometimes we went for it too far away, but then we also didn't go for it when we were too close. So it is a kind of, you throw it 5 meters in front of you, right? And that means that we can hit people up to 10 meters away, right? But anything past that, right? So if we try to throw it behind this line here, I do not believe we're gonna be able to hit this person, right? So it's a 10-meter range on it. But sometimes we're throwing it when we're past that, and then we're also not throwing it when we're within it, right? We'll have people right here where we just don't throw it on them. And keep in mind, Flashbang's a very powerful ability because it can stun people, right? So for example, if we're struggling to get past a choke point, right, and there's a Reinhardt who's shielding it, we can just, flash above Reinhardt's shield, which means that our entire team, right, 6 people on our team, can burst them down in that second that his shield's down, right? So that's just and you get that back on a 10 seconds, right? That's you're gonna be getting that back pretty frequently. Yet we didn't really use it very often on our attack at all, right? And same on our defense. Right? Now moving on to some different areas here. This one probably is gonna be pretty important for you is positioning. So if and this is something that's gonna apply to every character in the game. Spare maybe like 1 or 2, and then most FPS games out there. If we are standing right here, right, and there's a whole enemy team standing over there, and they're all shooting at us, it takes us 1, 2, 3 seconds to get behind cover. Now, from this point, we cannot get shot at. You cannot shoot through solid objects. We are safe. But in that time it took us to walk here, we died, right? Now, from here, we can, in half of a second, duck around this corner, right? They see us, now they can't see us. They see us, now they can't see, right? It's very fast. It's much faster than 3 seconds. It's half a second, right? So therefore, good positioning is the usage of cover, and bad positioning is the absence of cover. When there's no cover, you're in a bad spot because you're going to die very easily, and that's going to result in a lot of deaths, which we already discussed is very bad to have a lot of deaths, right? So there's a lot of different types of cover and positioning that you can use, right? You have slopes like so, right? You have pillars, right? We can do this in between shots when we're reloading, when we're low health, when we're getting shot at or ulted at, right? You have like corners like that. You have random objects you find lying around. You can use the payload like this, right? You have pillars, corners, doorway, corner, and then high ground. The entire thing acts as natural cover, right? They can see us, now they can't see us. He can see us, now he can't see us. We add in a crouch, same thing, right? So all of high ground is very fantastic positioning. On top of that, right, not a lot of characters can get up to you. Only about like a third of the characters in the game can reach you up on a high ground without using the stairs, and then those characters require abilities. Most of them do, right? So that means that they're just out of ability. So you have that's an extra layer of survivability, is that most characters can't get up to you very easily. Right? On top of that, high ground gives you very fantastic visibility. We can see over here, we can see over here, we can see back there, right? We can see over here, we can see over here. Now if we're on a low ground, we can't see over there, we can't see over there, we can't see over there, and we cannot see any of the high grounds here. Right? So high ground's going to give you a ton of different advantages, and we just want to make sure that we're taking it, and in between fights that we're rotating to the best place possible. Right? Now, I think while we're on the topic of positioning, we'll just quickly go over. Now this one, honestly, I didn't see as too much of an issue for you, though you did ask the question of should I shoot a shields, right? That was the question you were asking right before.
Keep 'em coming.
Yes, I was muted. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah, you're good. Okay, so this is kind of to answer your question. Is whenever it's an option, we shouldn't. But if it's not an option, we should. Now, to clarify what I'm talking about there is that comes down to target priority and how we position ourselves. So target priority is basically we shouldn't shoot at tanks. Tanks aren't the things that we want to shoot at most of the time. They have 2 to 3 times the health of other characters. They have tanking abilities. They have shields. And on top of that, DPS and supports just do more. DPS do damage, supports do healing. Now, tanks is a very important role, but they just create space, right? They're not the ones that provide the statistical output. So we want to focus the DPS and supports, not the tanks, but very often, tanks are just going to be on the front line, right? So what we do to get around that front line, so we'll just take an example from here, is when let's say the enemy team's standing right there and our team's standing right here, right? This is the main angle. If we're sitting here, we shoot at shields, we shoot at tanks the entire time, right? This isn't going to be very beneficial for us because we don't want to be doing this all the time. So what we can do is we can come left side. Now this is what you call a off angle, right? This is anything that's not the main angle, right? That gets us directly past the shields, past the tanks, to the things that we want to kill, right? And on top of that, it's very short, it's very safe, right? Off angles are inherently short and safe. We'll talk about when they aren't that in a second here. But we want to make sure that we're going for off angles to get around the shields, right? We can do another example here. Enemy team's there, our team's here. We can take a quick second to just do this real quick, and boom, we're on another off angle. Most high grounds act as off angles, as we can just immediately get around the shields, get around the tanks, and get to the back line, right? So that's just something that you can use to get around tanks. Now, off angles aren't always going to be an option. So take last map, for example. This is why I didn't say that I brought it up because of the fact that you messed up in this area. I'm bringing it up because you mentioned it. So take the last map, Hanamura. There were no off angles that you could take when you're stuck in the choke, right? There's one single entryway that you can take if you're on McCree. Now you can maybe go through like the window or above it, like if you're on like Hanzo, for example, or a different character. But on McCree, you have one singular area where you can make it through. So therefore, when there's no off angles, that's where you can focus the tanks, right? So it's not that you never shoot at tanks. You shoot at tanks when they're the only thing to shoot at. So for example, that's what we did on the last map we were on. We shoot at tanks when they're low. We shoot at tanks when they're out of position, right? Those are the times where we can shoot at tanks. Did that all make sense?
Yeah, perfect. Okay, I understand. So it's like a waste of time, basically.
Yep. Yeah. If you have the option to get past them, don't waste your time with them, right? But if they're
Okay.
if they're only thing, then you can, right? You have something else to add?
No, okay, I
All right.
completely understand.
Yep. Okay. So now moving on to kill feed awareness and paying attention to that. So basically, when it comes to paying attention to the kill feed, which is the top right corner of your screen, right? It shows when people are alive and dead, right? This will tell you whether or not you're winning or losing fights. When you are up 1 to 2 people, that is an advantage. When you have an advantage, you can play more aggressively, you can push forward a little bit more because they have less people that can shoot at you and punish you. Right? Now you don't want to feed, but you can afford to get more aggressive. Now when you're up 2 to 3 people, that is where you have officially won the fight, or pretty much won the fight, right? At that point, you don't want to use ults because ulting in a one fight is overkill, right? And on top of that, you want to look to get super aggressive so you can look to go forward and get stagger the enemy team, which we'll talk about in a second. Now, if this also goes the exact opposite way, when you are down 1 to 2 people, that is a disadvantage. Now, when you have a disadvantage, it's not that you've lost the fight, you just are playing a little bit more passive. You are losing the fight. You haven't lost it yet, though. When you're down 2 to 3 people, that is where you've pretty much lost the fight. At that point, you don't want to ult, because if you ult, that's not going to change the fact that you lost, and it's just going to waste it. And then on top of that, you want to look to get out if possible, and if you can't get out, you want to look to die. Now, this also means that you don't walk forwards in a fight where you know that you've already lost. So, for example, walking back into second, like when we're walking from first point, or sorry, second point to first point, right, to recontest, when we have one person alive, right? If we're going in and it's a 2v6, that is inherently, we're basically walking into a fight that we've already lost to begin with, right? Now, you don't want to do that because then that's just giving them ult charge, it's just wasting your time, and it's meaning that you don't have good positioning. Instead, we don't walk in and just look to take the high ground and reposition yourself, right? Now, if you had 5 people alive and you were all able to go back in, then go ahead and go back in because it's a 5v6 and that's very winnable, right? So that's just how to tell whether or not you're winning or losing and make sure you're paying attention to that. Now, ultimate wise, you can use, like, so far we're kind of holding on to it. Like, you didn't use a single one so far in that last game. Oh no, you use one when you're at choke. Sorry, my bad. Now when you're using it, you have 2 ways that you can get away, or 3 ways that you can get away with using it. You have using cover, which you did when you used it, so that's good. You use cover and shields, and you get bubbles, and you basically use your team and your tanks to support you as you go through it. That's an option. The other thing is you can look to take an off angle or a flank and use it as a surprise advantage. Now, I forgot to talk about a flank, so I'll go over that real quick. The difference between an off angle and a flank is an off angle would be if we went to the high ground, right? So we're doing the same instance, but a flank would be if we went all the way around, all
I
the way
came from
around,
behind.
all the way
Yeah.
around, right? All the way around, all the way around. So a flank is inherently dangerous and or long, so we don't want to go for them in the middle of fights because that just took us out of the fight for a super long time. But we could do that before the fight starts, especially if we're looking for high noon. Now, we don't want to do that just normally. We probably only do this if we're looking for high noon, but if we did this while we're looking for high noon, then we get behind them, and it gives them a lot less time to react to us, right? So they're not going to be able to react to us before we're able to get it off. So that's why that we would want to do that, but only in between fights, right? Besides that, we also don't want to do that in the middle of fights, and we don't want to be doing it when we don't have our ult, right? And you can also do that with the same thing with an off angle, right? Just go to the high ground real quick and do it. And the third thing we can do with it is just get super far away, especially if they don't have anything that can hit you from super far away, right? This will make you a super hard target to kill. Now, if they have like a sniper, then don't do this, but if they don't have anything that can kill you from super far away and you just do it from here, they're not going to have enough damage to kill you fast enough at this distance, right? So just be careful about what they have on their team. Now, we are coming up on the end of our session here, so we're going to hop into the review phase. Sorry that it took us like 20 minutes to get into it there. Queue
Yeah,
times
that's
kind of suck. But yeah, I mean, just for future reference, right? If you're when you're a DPS and you're doing streaming comp, usually it's going to be good to have like priority passes, or if you don't have them, then probably be a good idea to do a different mode, like a replay or quick play. That way we're not sitting in queue, or probably replay would be the best. That way you're not sitting in queue times for so long, and then that kind of wastes a lot of the session. All right. So getting into, we'll kind of go around the block here, right? We're going to go over a review over everything we talked about, then the main points, and then from there we're going to wrap it up, right? So abilities, want to make sure we're using Flashbang more often and looking to utilize it to get kills, as we're not really using it too often. Though McCree, his abilities aren't usually too insanely important. We just want to make sure we're using it. Now, Roll has 3 different uses out of it, right? You can use it for mobility, to get somewhere faster, you can use it to dodge out something, or you can look to use it to reload, right? So just make sure we're using that as well more often, and just looking to get the max usage out of it. Besides that, his abilities aren't the most powerful, so just make sure we're using them, not holding on to them. Ultimate, exact same thing, is make sure we're using it, right? We talked about you use it in any fight that you have it, as long as it's not been won or lost yet, which is going to happen pretty frequently. And on top of that, you want to look to use it. Now, we didn't get into this, but just make sure you're using it as well at the beginning of fights. You don't want to use it too late, because that can result in a whole lot of mishaps, right? Just use it. You don't want to use it mid-fight or late fight. You want to use it early most of the time, so right as the fight is starting. Now, just in general, just use it more often. We talked about how you can use it just a second ago, so I'm not, don't have to repeat it, right? Just off angle, flank, protection, or far away, right? Or how you can get away with it. Just make sure we're using it as well, because it is a pretty powerful ability, right? It's not as powerful as other ultimates, but it still is a powerful ability. It's going to allow you to get kills pretty easily. We just want to look to utilize it so we can get those kills, right? Now moving on to mechanics. Now on the mechanics end, we talked about lowering your sensitivity. That's going to help a little bit, and honestly, it did look like you're hitting a lot more shots after the FFA was up there and we were actually in the match. Now, on top of that, we also talked about like how your movement's going to affect that. We talked about target priority, right? So make sure you're shooting at supports and DPS, not tanks whenever it's an option. And then besides that, mechanics honestly weren't too terrible. I think you'll find that there's a whole lot of stuff that feeds into mechanics, right? You have just generic shooting, right, where you just kind of sit here and shoot, but that's not how it's going to actually be in most games. You're going to have things like shields in the way. You're going to have, and you're going to, when you're dead, you can't do anything. So positioning is going to have a very large say in whether or not you have good mechanics, because if you are positioning correctly, you're going to be able to your mechanic is going to prop up your mechanics. You're going to be able to do more, whereas if you have poor positioning, you're not going to be able to do anything with your mechanics, even if you have really good mechanics, right? So then that means moving on to positioning, right? Make sure that you're not standing too far away, but you're keeping a mid-range, right? Not too close, not too far, because McCree does have fall off the further away he gets. Make sure that we're not standing out in the open, right? Because poor positioning is the absence of cover. Good positioning is the usage of cover, right? Make sure we're using cover and staying good in that regards. Make sure we're taking high grounds so we get the advantage from high grounds, right? Those are going to be really powerful. Make sure as well that we're taking off angles, right, to get around shields and get around tanks so that we can just instantly get to the back line. Now, just in case, I think you're pretty new. Are you aware of looking for the skulls when you're ulting?
No. With it? Oh yeah. So basically,
Yeah.
I wait until there's a skull in front of everyone, then shoot.
Yep, exactly. Now, it doesn't always necessarily need to be in front of everybody, but it really depends on the situation. I didn't see you use ult enough to be able to like advise you on that yet. So that's just something to keep in mind. Like if you see one person they can kill, sometimes that's just worth it, because you also might, the longer you wait, sometimes that lets them get away from you. It depends on the situation. Sometimes the longer you wait, it's gonna be better. Sometimes the longer you wait, it's gonna be worse. Right now, moving on to awareness, there's a whole lot of stuff that goes into awareness, so we're going to go around the block here. Starting off with HUD watching. Make sure you're paying attention to your ultimate and make sure you're paying attention to your health. Those were 2 big ones. When you're not paying attention to your ult, you never use it, and when you're not paying attention to your health, that's going to mean that we never we never see that we're low, and then therefore we go in and we die easier, right? So pay attention to your health. When you see that you're low, make sure in line of sight of your supports, and then you're also looking for healing and requesting healing and pressing the button, as that's going to get you healing faster. Now on top of that, we talked about paying attention to the kill feed, right? Make sure paying attention to that. We just went over that a minute ago, right? So just it's 1 to 2 is advantage, disadvantage. 2 to 3 is won or lost. No ults in a won or lost fight, and then look to get super aggressive to get staggers, or to back up if you can, or look to regroup if you can. I forgot to ask, are you familiar with the term staggering yet?
Oh, I don't, not really.
No. So staggering is basically anytime you die really late. When you die late, right, and your whole team's ahead of you, that means that they either they have two decisions. If they wait for you, now you've just wasted a bunch of time, and if they do not wait for you, now they're walking into a fight where they have a disadvantage, right? And that means that they might lose the fight, or they might even be walking in you might even be walking with one person, right? And that means that they're just going to end up losing without you. So we don't want to stagger ourselves. That's why we look to back out if we can, or let them kill us. That way we don't just stay in there for super long and then stagger, as we did that a couple of times. So we just want to make sure that we're paying attention to whether or not we won or lost and how many teammates we have alive. So that's going into the next category of make sure we're paying attention to in-game. Where's the enemy team at? Where is our team at, right? As many times that we just didn't notice, keep in mind you can see teammates through walls, right? So make sure you're paying attention to that, as that'll allow you to, tell whether or not we're up or down people in a fight, right? As well, pay attention to where's the enemy team. There was a lot of times where people snuck up on us, like right behind us, right? Because we weren't aware of of our surroundings, right? Or we just weren't aware of what's happening in the fight. So make sure we're paying attention to our surroundings, right? We're not gonna walk around having kind of a slow pan move in. Right? Instead, we're going to look around us, right? Look left, look right. We're going to do a 360 once in a while, check what's happening around us. And I'll make sure we're just keeping our eyes open and not tunnel visioning on our crosshair, tunnel visioning on one thing in front of us. Right? On top of that, keep your ears open, right? There were some times where we just ended up missing someone who just walked up right behind us. So turn up your volume if you need to, but also just pay attention to it. Pay attention to footsteps, gunshots, other sounds, right? That like that. And then from there, I think that is pretty much it on the awareness end. Now, I know that awareness can be pretty confusing, so I'll go into this real quick. How does one, you might be thinking in your head, like, how does one even, like, improve on that? Like, how does one, get better at something that is, like, paying attention to things, right? That seems, like, pretty vague in comparison to just ulting more, right? Now, it's really the same way that you're looking to improve at anything you're trying to improve at here, and that is focus on it while you're playing. Don't just autopilot while you're playing, or even focus on even focusing on winning is a bad mentality to be in. You should be instead focusing on improving. So while you're playing, you should be focusing, and your brain should look something like this, where we're going awareness, 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 right?
Yeah.
And when we do that,
Okay.
right, yeah, when we do that, you're going to notice that we're looking around us a bit more. We're paying attention to the things that's around us, right? Because we're giving ourselves a constant reminder, and we're really focusing on awareness, and therefore awareness is going to be a little bit better than usual. And when we do that for a long enough period of time, that's going to form as a habit, and when it forms as a habit, we no longer need to put that amount of focus or energy or effort or reminders into it, and therefore we can move on to a different area, right? So that's how you look to improve at anything we're talking about here, so just make sure you're looking to apply that. Now, don't try to go for everything at once, because we talked about quite a bit, right? That's going to get overwhelming and confusing. Instead, focus on like one category, or like 1 to 3 tinier things, right, in between that. So just don't try to do everything at once. All right, so moving on now to kind of the main points. What are the main points of our session here? Okay, so let me take a second to think about this. Ability usage, I'm going to put pretty low. Ult usage is pretty important. Okay, so probably going to put positioning as number 1, as that resulted in a whole lot of deaths, as well as a whole lot of positional errors, and that this didn't allow us to do as much as we could have been doing. I'm going to put awareness as number 2, as again that resulted in a whole lot of deaths, and then we died a whole lot, and that didn't really, we ended the game with like, I think like 10 or 11 deaths, right, something like that, and that means that that's a whole lot of time that we lost out on. When, let's say, like, we take 3 deaths out, now that's an entire extra minute of playtime that we've added to our game. Take 3 more deaths out, that's an entire 2 minutes of gameplay that we have added to our game. So just us dying less is going to be very, very good for us, right? Now, on top, so that was 1, 2. 3, I'm probably going to put at ult usage, as that was, we didn't even use it at all, so just make sure you're using it, and that's probably a big one, is like, you can't even have bad ult usage if you're not using your ult, right? So ults definitely need to be worked on. And then mechanics is coming at number 4. Now, I think that you're honestly doing much better after, like, in that match that you were in the free for all, and you're just gonna get even better and better once you get used to that new sensitivity. Because that was a new sensitivity that you're working with that you've never been on before, and that usually takes a couple days to get used to. So you'll get better when you work on that. Just focus on the other things as well. And then number 5 is going to be ability usage, not because they were like fantastic or anything, but mainly just because McCree doesn't have super powerful abilities, so they're not very important. Though I would still focus on them and make sure you're using Flash more. Right, but it's also pretty decently easy fix in comparison to like focusing on awareness. Right, it's just use it more often. Right, that usually is going to be slightly easier to apply than trying to be aware of more things around you. Right, that all makes sense. Do you have any questions about anything we've gone over?
Not really, but I understand now I need to focus on. What do you think the thing I need to focus on? Like, what's the most important thing right now?
Yeah. So that was the order that I was giving you right there. Was that was for that purpose of knowing which to focus on first. So your number 1 thing I said was positioning, and then number 2 was awareness. Sorry. Number 3 was ultimate usage. Number 4 was your mechanics, and then number 5 was your ability usage. Right.
Okay.
Ultimate usage would probably be much higher if it was a more powerful ultimate. McCree honestly doesn't have the most powerful ultimate in comparison to other characters. That's kind of how it is with both of those things. So like with your abilities and your high noon, is McCree just doesn't have super powerful ones. If you were on a different character and you weren't using your abilities, let's say you were on like Zarya and you just never use your abilities and you never use grab, I would definitely put those as like the number 1 and 2 things. But because you're on a McCree where they're not as important, they're not very high priority, right? So just make sure you're focusing on them still, but I would focus on the other things first. That makes sense?
Justice ain't gonna
Yeah, I understand now.
All right. So, yep. And then if you don't have any other questions, I'm going to